Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices hosted by World Information Transfer. We are focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And today we will have students from Ukraine talking to us about the current situation in Ukraine. The first student is Yana Matsko. She was born in the Volyn region and lives in Lviv. She studies at the Faculty of the Journalism of Lviv National University. Previously, she was an intern at the well-known Lviv online media. She helps Ukrainian army with donations, and during the first months of war, helped collect photos and videos of Russian war crimes against the Ukrainian citizens. The next speaker will be Davyd Potapchyk. He was born in the Donetsk region. He lives and studies in Kremenchuk after moving during the events of 2014 there. Currently, he's in his fourth year pursuing a degree in Germanic languages and translation at the Kremenchuk Mykhailo Ostrohradskyi National University. Finally, we have Sofia Stasiuk. Sofia Stasiuk is a student at the Lviv University, and she studies journalism and cultural media. She is a member of the English program, participant in projects of journalism called Holos. During the project, she wrote an article about studying in Ukraine during the past war. Over to you, Yana.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by saying that Russian aggression against Ukraine did not begin in 2022, but much earlier. In March 2014, Russia annexed Crimea. In April, the Russian military occupied and established the so-called People's Republics in Donetsk and Luhansk in the east of Ukraine. Even before 2022, Russians had been shelling Ukrainian civilians for 8 years, holding them in concentration camps, torturing and killing them. On the 21st of February, Russia launched a large-scale invasion of Ukraine along the entire length of the common border. Ukraine put up a strong resistance. The full-scale invasion came as a shock to many of us. This great war is much more brutal than the one in 2014, geographically in terms of the number of occupied territories, civilian and military casualties, and the more inhuman methods of the warfare used by the Russian military to take Ukrainian lives. The war has affected all areas of our lives, and it still does. Every day we overcome new challenges that test our strengths. One of the challenges for Ukrainian youth, namely students, was studying during the war, and today I want to talk about this. The first problem is the occupation of Ukrainian territories. About 20% of the total territory of Ukraine is occupied. The southern parts of Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions, the left bank Kherson region, small parts of Kharkiv and Mykolaiv regions, the entire Luhansk region and Crimea. Many Ukrainians, including students, remain in the temporarily occupied territories. Obviously, this has made it much more difficult to continue their studies and put it on hold. Of course, they cannot continue to attend classes because it is dangerous to move around these territories. A large amount of territory and civilian infrastructure is mined. In addition, there is a constant threat of shelling. In the occupied territories, it is often impossible to satisfy basic human needs for food and water. It is even less likely to have access to stable internet and power supply for studying. So in some areas, even distance education is not possible. At the same time, the constant shelling and psychological pressure obviously do not contribute to the successful acquiring of knowledge. The second problem is destroyed educational institutions. From the first days of the full-scale invasion, the Russian occupiers began cynically shelling civilian infrastructure, including educational institutions. In March 2022, the Ministry of Education of Ukraine launched an interactive map of damage to educational infrastructure, and this website names Save Schools in UA. The website contains all the information about the number of destroyed and damaged educational institutions in each region. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russians have damaged 3,536 educational institutions, and 337 have been completely destroyed. Let me tell you about a few examples. Irpin's largest educational institution, the State Tax University, sustained significant damage. Destroyed walls, shattered windows, broken doors, and a mess in the surviving classrooms are the consequences of shelling. Academic buildings, gyms, and dormitories need at least 6 months, if not a year, for major repairs and reconstruction. Next is both Mariupol State University and Priazovsky State Technical University. They also were damaged by Russian shelling. In particular, according to witnesses, in early March, Russians dropped bombs on the building of the Priazovsky State Technical University. In the early March 2022, Russian troops attacked the building of the Faculty of Economics of Vasil Karazin Kharkiv National University with a missile attack. The missile completely destroyed the roof and ceilings, and a fire broke out in the building. The building of physics and mathematics was shelled several times in February and March 2022. The shelling destroyed some of the classrooms in the building, and most of them burned down as a result of the fire. The library, the Museum of Nature, and the Karazin Sports Complex were also damaged as a result of hostile attacks. As a result, many students were unable to physically attend their classes. However, even those universities that are still standing and are located in occupied or near frontline areas are not safe to visit and study. As a result, some universities have to relocate to safer areas, often to the west of Ukraine. Ukrainian universities located in relatively safe regions accept students from cities with active military hostilities. They can join courses in their fields of study, and after graduation, they can receive a document certifying that they have completed the courses. The third problem is the evacuation of students abroad. Please, Sofia, previous slide. Thank you. There are currently no accurate statistics of how many students have gone abroad because of the Russian full-scale invasion. However, from my personal experience, and I think the students present will agree with me, there are students in every academic group who are still abroad. Refugee students face several challenges at once. First is the continuing education in Ukraine. Some universities in safer areas started offline classes in September, but students who were abroad could not physically attend classes. Some universities have introduced distance studying for such students, but it has not completely solved the problem. Many students abroad have problems with constant access to the internet. The next problem is adaptation in a new place and difficulties due to lack of knowledge of the language. I think there is no need to explain this problem further. And the next is the necessity to work to provide for the living abroad, such as housing, food, everyday life, etc. Students work during the time they should be studying. Combining work and study is not easy and sometimes impossible. Because of their work, students do not have time to study at the same pace as their classmates and do not have the physical and psychological resources to catch up. So all these factors make it much more difficult to continue education abroad. But not everything is so bad. At the same time, Ukrainian students have received many new opportunities and offers for free or partially free education in international higher education institutions and also accommodation in student dormitories. Among these friendly universities are those in Poland, the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Lithuania, Croatia, Estonia, Sweden, France, Germany, Spain, Switzerland, Finland, etc. The next problem of education during the war is the difficulties of distance studying. As I have already mentioned, some universities of Ukraine chose to study in a distance format during the war. This format has been familiar to us since the COVID-19 pandemic. However, it should be understood that distance studying in times of war is much more difficult for several reasons. First is power outages and, as a result, lack of internet access. The deficit of in Ukraine's power system caused by Russian attacks on energy infrastructure is remains. So emergency and stabilization power outages continue in some regions. At the same time, Ukrainian power engineers and utilities are doing truly heroic things, restoring in weeks what would have taken months of work. The longest power outage, in my experience, lasted about 16 hours. It was impossible to plan your day properly with such a schedule, and it seemed unrealistic to study. But we did study. We looked forward to the lights coming on, then immediately put all our gadgets on charged and started studying. Sometimes we also used candles and flashlights to read. The blackouts occurred according to schedules that were not always well established. Some students, when the power was cut off in their area, went to their friends in another area where it had just been switched on. And a real salvation for many students was the various places with petrol generators and internet access, which allowed them to continue their studies. The next problem is a threat of a missile attack. A loud air alarm sounds whenever there is a threat of a missile attack. Students who are at home or at university move to the bomb shelter. Accordingly, the educational process is interrupted and stopped. Sometimes the alarm can last for 30 minutes and you can continue your class, and sometimes it lasts for several hours. This is a disadvantage as time to gain knowledge and new information is running out and there will not always be time to catch up. So some topics simply remain unexplored. This can be called external factors that affect studying. Another thing is that even if students have the opportunity to continue their studies, they may not have enough moral resources. These are internal factors. To a greater or lesser extent, the war has affected the psychological health of all Ukrainians. Every day we receive sad news about dead and wounded Ukrainians, shelling, new details about war crimes, etc. Almost every Ukrainian has relatives, friends, or acquaintances defending our country at the front line. Every day we worry, how are they doing? All of this causes constant stress and anxiety. It is very difficult to concentrate on studying and completing tasks in such a psychological state. I want to add that There can be even several alarms in a day. We feel a constant stress and anxiety, so it obviously affects the quality of education. But at this point, children and students have to save their lives, so they move to the bomb shelter. And I want to show you a fragment of a video of how this happens. I can quickly name the ways to improve education during the war is support and help each other, give yourself time and space to recover, take at least small steps to get closer to victory. And also what we need is understanding and loyalty from our teachers. So I believe that students from the occupied territories will be able to move to the territories controlled by Ukraine and continue their studies in safety. I believe the students will be able to return home from abroad as soon as possible and will also have the opportunity to study safely. I believe that Ukraine will win because the truth is on our side. And after the victory, we will rebuild everything, all schools and universities. And students will be able to enter the universities of Irpin, Mariupol, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Kherson, and others. Slava Ukraini! Glory to Ukraine!
Thank you very, very much, Yana. It was an excellent presentation, extremely well documented, and we will publish a lot of this material. And now let us move to Davyd Potapchyk. David, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here. The topic of my today's presentations is when men children go to war, or how does one become a propaganda asset for a hostile nation. In these trying times, the only source of betterment of one's morale the only two sources are, number one, the victories of our soldiers, and number two, the failures of our enemies. And as for the failures of our enemies, I am going to showcase you one and show how does one become a propaganda asset. So let us begin. Let's start with an introduction. The man on the picture right there is named Gonzalo Lira. He's leading a YouTube channel called Coach Red Pill. He's a dating advisor and a dating coach who dabbles into politics and is also notorious for being a scammer and a person who leeches on important events in order to get people's money. He has a wife and 2 children. He is writing an Agent Bond-esque book when he is where the main character is an obvious self-insert who basically humanizes every female character. And he also plans to organize a coaching camp for his followers. At the first sight, one can see a simple man who is perhaps plagued by a middle-age crisis or something, who is not at all harmful. But let us move on. 1 year later, he is known for being a pro-Russian propagandist, an alleged rapist, a child abuser. He is now detained by the SBU, and he is a martyr in the eyes of a pro-Russian blogosphere. One may ask, how is he detained by the SBU? Is he really that stupid? Apologies for the insult, to spew pro-Russian propaganda whilst being in Ukraine? My answer is yes. He was in Kharkiv when the escalation started. The missiles were literally flying over his head, and the only thought he had was, these are the good guys shooting at us. Let us move on. I have an example of what kind of content he puts on his YouTube channel. I hope it has some aerial playback. In case it doesn't, I have images. Can you hear it?
No, it's your PowerPoint is not moving.
Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps I should do it like this. Can you see it now?
Well, now we can see it, yes.
Right. Here is he before the war started, and here is a picture of him after the war started. I presume the presentation audio or the audio from the video also doesn't play, so I'm just going to show you the thumbnails of the videos he puts out. Most of his videos are vehemently pro-Russian. Most of the times he accuses Ukrainians of committing the war crimes Russians did. For example, Bucha massacre, the deliberate shellings of civilians in Mariupol and such, the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline he attributes to Americans. Gotta give him some credit. Well, basically an average douche, an average propagandist douche that is now different to people like Nick Fuentes or Ethan Ralph and perhaps Tucker Carlson. But the only thing that makes him stand out amongst them is, once again, is that he lives in Ukraine as it all happens. He is quite literally being bombed and thinks that we are being bombed by the good guys. If any of the people attending this meeting are in Kharkiv right now, you may have actually passed by him on the street. And here I'm going to show you some article headers for Russia Today when covering his arrests. In fact, there were 2 arrests. So he is actually attained some semblance of a martyr status even amongst the Russians who see pro-Russian Westerners as nothing but useful idiots, which is later on exemplified by their absolute lack of care. The question is, how does one become a Russian propaganda asset? Well, first of all, we gotta give some credit to the Russian propaganda ministry or whoever is responsible for controlling the narratives. Due to their effort, most of the times, they are capable of producing misinformation that is extremely cohesive or not extremely cohesive and causes an extremely strong emotional response, causing the viewer to take Russian side or at least not Ukrainian side, and even in the most extreme cases to stand aside and pretend no one is the good guy here, but these Ukrainian people are kind of suspicious. The other factor that pushed Gonzalo Lira to pro-Russian side is the peer pressure. Aside from giving dating advice on his channel, he was also notorious for hosting various political bloggers, I guess. He was giving them a platform. These people were from various sides of the political campus. There were communists, there were fascists, there were libertarians, there were just your average Tucker Carlson fan. But most of these people he befriended, and most of these people were actually right-leaning and pro-Russian, which caused him to adopt the same views. And third factor that we must take into consideration is his ego. As he mentioned before, he writes a book where he's with a self-insert character, where he's basically a clone of James Bond, a new macho. And we also should take into consideration that he has a dating advice channel, which shows that he may have a lack of self-esteem. And if there was an opportunity to give him some semblance of heroic status, like make him some sort of extremely good journalist, like Hunter S. Thompson did with his gonzo journalism, like give him the fame that he thinks he deserves, perhaps he could be pushed to the Russian side, and he did. And of course, money is also at play. He was quite poor before the war started, but since he started covering the events in a favorable light for Russians, he has started receiving a lot of donations from people sharing his beliefs, which led him to considering producing more such videos. And there's also let's say, I think saying no direct contact, plausible deniability is key. This is referring to how the people responsible for manipulating the public amongst Russians this is their imperative. There should not be a Russian guy telling you how the things are going. There should be an innuendo. You should lead people to a conclusion that something is happening. You should not tell them directly, like Ukrainians did Bucha. No, you should sow the seed of doubt among the audience to make it and organize it in such a way that would make it click. Like, oh, so all these things were actually done by Ukrainians. Haha, I'm so smart. I figured it out on my own. If people come to conclusions such as these, if they were not directly told, they are more likely to hold on to such beliefs. And I've highlighted Scott Ritter, former intelligence officer. I also wanted to point out desperation. This is also an important factor. Scott Ritter is a convicted sex offender. He tried to molest a child thrice. One attempt was successful, which led to him fleeing the US and moving to Russia and starting work with them, which is another example of how they are recruited. Ego, money, peer pressure, manipulation, and desperation. So, since I mentioned before that he was arrested, we perhaps should, back in March of 2022, even not in 2023, he spent 1 year in house arrest before he was moved to a jail. People were inquiring what happened to him. Did these neo-Nazis at the SBU actually kill him, or did they subject him to torture? Well, he claims he was subjected to torture, but there are absolutely no visible signs of this. He claimed that the SBU had his cellmates torture him, and that they had the cellmates question him. For some reason, I don't know what kind of cell did they put them in with prisoners who actually speak English. Gonzalo doesn't know a word in Russian or Ukrainian, just in case. And he also claimed that, oh, should I speed up?
David, you have about 5 minutes left. So.
Oh, absolutely. There's 3 slides left. I'm wrapping it up. Right. So he claims he was tortured, and this starts making waves in the media. And then his father comes out. He says that he visits multiple talk shows, multiple podcasts, and highlights the situation his son goes through, which leads to his name being mentioned on one of the White House press conferences. One of the journalists asked, "What's up with Gonzalo? When will you free him?" Which resulted in an indefinite response from the speaker answering the questions. Later on, he was even mentioned at one of the UN meetings. If I was correct, it was about human rights. Going on, he is later released on bail, most likely because SBU tried to exchange him for some prisoners, but Russians did not show any willingness to exchange him from one of the Ukrainians. So he is released on bail, and by Gonzalo's admission, the SBU made his cellmates pressure him into leaving the country somehow. So the situation is this: they give him like a shoulder bump. We release you on bail, you go quiet, and you leave the country. Everybody comes out clean. What does he do? He approaches a border between Ukraine and Hungary, and he makes 3 15-minute videos about how he's going to escape. Of course, this pressures the SBU further, which leads to his new arrests, and his current whereabouts as of now are unknown. His, let's say, colleagues on the right think that he is actually in a labor camp or being tortured again. We can't say for sure. The only thing we can say is that he is most likely still alive. And let us move on to conclusions. So, when it comes to being in a country that is a war country, hubris kills, and in case of Gonzalo, whose arrest is depicted on this picture, and his books also on the table is also in the picture. On this slide, hubris kills, and fame in cloud chasing also gets you killed. And if it doesn't, it gets you put into jail, or it hurts you and the people you love. For us, Russians are not direct in their ways and are actually trying to manipulate the public in order to have them come to their side. There's no direct contact, like I mentioned. The most let's say, like I mentioned on the slide, the best recruits for Russian for spreading Russian propaganda are the political dissidents, both on left and right. People who are not satisfied with the status quo, so they are reaching out for something they can align with. For example, China, for example, I don't know, Japan with their extreme isolationists, or Russia. And also we have to take into account the sheer desperation that the people who are pushed into being a hostile propaganda asset in a war zone, being surrendered to people who actually think you are one of them. The sheer desperation that has to be on display is astounding. I want to end my presentation, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, David. It was a very interesting presentation about the people that you seem to have studied a great deal. So our next speaker is Sofia Stasiuk. Over to you, Sofia.
Yeah, first of all, I'm profoundly grateful to Dr. Dubok and the World Information Transfer for granting me this platform to express my thoughts and deliver my presentation. Today, I'm honored to share my voice with all of you. And I'm studying journalism at National University of Lviv. I appreciate all the opportunities that open up to a person who chooses to be a journalist. I have some plans to try my best in international journalism, and I realized that writing about Ukraine has become less frequent. It should be also understood that domestic politics is actually ahead of foreign politics in terms of popularity. And for Ukrainians, the consequences of the war are obvious, such as people are dying, entire villages and cities are being destroyed, our cultural monuments are being bombed by Russians. And however, foreigners cannot see it firsthand. Despite this, the war affects everyone. And the first thing that can be noticed is increase in prices worldwide. The war in Ukraine and its aftermath will last for years and will touch many countries. The threat to world food security is real now. Grain prices will rise, and then the countries of Africa and Asia will not be able to buy it. Russia is playing hunger games with people all over the world. The terrorist state uses hunger for blackmail and pursues its commercial interest, just as it did in the Soviet Union and caused Holocaust in Ukraine and other republics of the Union in 1921, 1932, and year 1946. And 1 month ago, Russia stopped participating in the Black Sea Grain Agreement, concluded in July 2022, with mediation of Turkey and the UN. At that time, 22 million tons of grain were blocked in Ukraine. And if the grain agreement doesn't work, then Ukraine will be able to export grain, but not in the same amount as before. So this will lead to decrease in its production. And it is so important to clarify that this is not because of Ukraine, but rather due to Russia's actions. And a lot of information is saturated with Russia's fakes and propaganda, so it's crucial to spread the truth. After Russia left the Black Sea Grain Agreement, they increased their attacks on the port infrastructure in southern Ukraine, particularly in the city of Odessa. On July 23rd, Russia attacked Odessa again, resulting in 1 person's death and 22 injuries, including 4 children. The attack also destroyed 6 residential buildings, including apartments, and the largest Orthodox church in Odessa, the Transfiguration Cathedral, located in the center of the city, was also damaged. And the Ministry of Defense of Russia cynically commented on the night missile attack on Odessa region. The occupiers said that they hit all the planned targets. Like, Russians sometimes get themselves confused in versions of their fakes. First, they can say Ukraine is bombing itself, and then they can claim that Russia launched a missile attack on facilities where terrorist acts against the Russian Federation were being prepared. Apparently, terrorist acts, according to the occupiers, were prepared preciously in civilian houses and Transfiguration Cathedral. Russian troops attacked Odessa with 19 missiles, but thankfully 9 of them were shot down. To keep Odessa in Ukraine safe, we urgently need anti-missile defense. We are seeking help from foreign partners who can provide the weapons needed to protect Ukrainians and our territories from Russia, which is a terrorist state. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, the whole world held its breath and watched in shock as the events progressed. And now many are trying to help. As one of the biggest humanitarian crises of recent history is unfolding, you will ask me a question: how can I help Ukraine if I'm abroad? And I have an answer, because you can do it in a lot of ways. And first of all, one of the most direct ways to help is by donating reputable organizations that are actively involved in providing aid and support to Ukraine. Then you can raise awareness about the situation in Ukraine by participating in protests or demonstrations in your local area. And then send humanitarian help to Ukraine. Coordinate with established relief organizations that are sending humanitarian aid to Ukraine. These organizations often accept material donations such as medical supplies, food, clothing, and other essential items. And then you can host Ukrainian refugees and helping them locally. Consider supporting them with housing, language skills, job opportunities, and integration into local community. This is the most comprehensive guide on how foreigners can help Ukraine, and it is an initiative called Support Ukraine Now, and on the website you can find more information you need. Russia's propaganda walks all around the world, and there's no other way to continue writing stories of eyewitnesses. Recently, I've been chosen to take part in the Holos project for journalists. My article is already published on the Outspoken Media, and while contemplating the topic for my article, I found it intriguing to write about the learning experience in Ukraine amidst the war. For me, as for student, it is really important topic that needs special attention. Now I'm going to explain why. Because nowadays, some Ukrainians study online, others go to university classrooms, and some were even forced to leave Ukraine. Fortunately, I'm able to attend face-to-face classes at the university. However, my success was often hampered by air raids that often interrupted the learning process. As a result, classes were cancelled, and students like me struggled to catch up on missed lessons. Sometimes these interruptions were frustrating and challenging for me, because it made it difficult to maintain a consistent study schedule. And trying to catch up after each cancellation was a daunting task, causing additional stress and anxiety. Although this is a challenging environment, I don't want to let air raids get in the way of my academic goals. But reality in Ukraine can be cruel. On December 31st, year 1922, the building of the exhibition campus of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv were damaged by a missile attack. The faculty of radio physics, electronics, and computer systems, where a lot of my friends study, was damaged as well. Fortunately, they studied online during the war, and no one was hurt. And life for young Ukrainians during the war has been a complex and challenging experience, marked by both resilience and frustration. Russia's invasion of Ukraine deprived young people a lot of opportunities, such as traveling, meeting with people, and just discovering the world. However, despite these difficulties, the difficulties they face, these young people remain determined to build a better future for themselves, for their country, and to ensure that their voices are heard in the ongoing struggle for peace and stability. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Yeah, it's particularly, I would like to mention the fact that you mentioned the history of the Russian method of killing people, starvation, the Holodomor in the 2030s, excuse me, the 1930s. And the recent is just something that unfortunately world media does not focus on. And it's very important that they begin focusing on this. Now we will go to Susie Halleck, who will be moderating your questions. Over to you, Susie.
Thank you, Dr. Durbach, and thanks all for the insightful presentations. Our first questions are for Yana. In the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that you helped collect photos and videos of Russian war crimes against civilians. Could you tell us a bit more about this experience?
Yes, it was the initiative of my photojournalism teacher. Some of you know Yaroslav Tabinsky. We collected photos and videos of Russian crimes. This included the destruction of buildings, sometimes the dead and wounded people, and it was right in the first weeks of the full-scale invasion. Of course, it was a terrible sight. I don't know how I was holding on then, but it really gave me the feeling that I was doing something useful, and I hope that in the future it will help bring the Russians to justice.
Susie, could you be so kind and ask one question of each student and continue that way, not to ask the same questions that you are asking?
Sure. So turning to David, how can we combat Russian propaganda among older generations?
Older generations. Well, the thing with older generations is that they are very susceptible, especially here in Eastern Europe. They are very susceptible to populism. And if something is emotionally charged, they'll believe it no matter whether it's true or not. So I guess I genuinely don't know. Probably trying to sit down with them person on person and talk some sense into them, or try to remind them why are they being shown things that they are seeing. So make them ask why. Just like with the younger generation, remind them that of critical thinking is important, especially with the media, when the media is talked about.
Thank you. And why do you think that people in occupied territories succumb to propaganda? What should be done to reduce the influence?
Well, Russia and let's start like this. Soviet Union and Russia, they don't have an exact propaganda framework, like for example in US or in the West. It doesn't work like that. They don't tell you lies on TV and people can instantly believe it. They tell you lies, and the police apparatus or the military enforce the lies. The viewer sees the lies as obvious, especially when it comes to occupied Ukraine. Like my grandpa was my grandpa was actually under shelling back in 2014, and the shelling was from the east side, from the side of the separatists. But then separatists come out brandishing guns, and they told them that it's angry Ukrainian fascists shelling you right now. So what kind of choice do people have? Do they agree and will get to live, or do they disagree, again physically taking out? They're getting shot. So what is the choice right there? So, and this is a humiliation ritual. The moment a person accepts such blatant lies, that's just one lie, just two lies, just three lies, and it keeps on happening. And later on, they become a part of the system, and they force other people to accept this without involving a arm of the state, let's say, without involving the violent people, like just becoming somewhat of a hive mind, I guess.
Thank you. Sofia, how do you think we can bring the world closer to the problems created from the war in countries where Ukraine is not often discussed?
Well, a few weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, I think, I was on a youth exchange and I met up with people from Hungary. And as you know, it is a country where the Russia's propaganda is huge, and like they don't discuss the war in Ukraine in the way like I asked them if there are any refugees from Ukraine in Hungary, and they responded me that yeah, it is a lot of people from Ukraine, but nobody is talking about it because it will be not fair that Hungary tries to support Russia, but also accept people from Ukraine who runs away from the war.
How do you think that the Ukrainian students can export the information worldwide through internet or what is actually going on so that people can see what you're showing us? How do you think would be the best way of doing it?
Use social media, use social.
Be specific how you're doing it.
I'm trying to I have a blog on my Instagram, and I'm trying to lead it in 2 languages, like not only in Ukrainian but in English too. So much more people can understand what I'm talking about, and try to take part in more today there's a lot of opportunities for Ukrainian students to make friends with people all around the world, and it is simple communication where you can translate your ideas, and that's it.
Thank you. And Yana,
So
how are you? I would like to have the answer of all the students to this one question, Susie. Yana?
I want to say, as I have already mentioned, I work as a journalist now at the local Lviv radio station. I verify and share the information about our reality, especially about Russian war crimes for Ukrainians, but I also share information in English on my social media, usually in Twitter, in order also to the world audience know what happens here in Ukraine. And this is also photos and videos, so that the world continues to support us. And I also wanted to say that Russian propaganda is very thin and strong. So I think it's my duty and everyone's Ukrainian duty to share this information as much as we can.
Thank you, Yana. And David, how are you sharing the information that you have presented to us?
Oh, how are you? Right. I mean, in my case, I would advise being subtle. For example, I have a lot of friends that I, for example, play games or watch videos with. They are from abroad. They're from Finland, Hungary, Poland, etc. And one of them, for example, held pro-Russian beliefs, and I just mentioned that there's an air alarm, and I developed some sense of sympathy for him, and now he is not pro-Russian. He has abandoned his ways. It's just, I guess, my take would be not to being a walking megaphone, trying to repeat one sentence at a time, trying to let's say, try to remind people that behind all these news articles about all these death statistics, all these death tolls, there are actual people, and these people have lives. These people are probably approachable. These people can speak to you. These people can probably share the same interest to you, and perhaps they are in need of help right now. So I guess being subtle and trying as much as possible to not be, let's say, overbearing or annoying. I
Thank you.
don't want to sound dissenting.
Over to you, Susie, please, one question to all three of them.
Yana, did you have any learning difficulties that resulted from the war, or is the education process at your university well organized?
Actually, yes, it's very well adjusted. The management of the university familiarized the students with safety techniques and the algorithm of actions in case of an air alarm and missile danger. During the alarm, the educational process stops. Teachers and students go to the shelter and stay there until the end of the air raid warning.
Thank you. David, whose support for Ukraine inspires you? Maybe is it from a popular person or a volunteer?
I follow, let's say, a podcaster who runs basically, let's say, a very elaborate gossip forum, and he is probably amongst the most like canceled or banned people in the world on the web, without actually committing a crime. Like, he is being punished unjustly. And the thing about him is that he shows very exact, he's very rational in his actions. And the fact that he sided with me and not with the Russians, no, with my side and not with the Russians, really does tell me that truth maybe on our, no, is on our side in his case. So yes, rational people, it's more of a rational people, not celebrities.
Thanks, David. Sofia, how long do you think Russia will be able to play a war of hunger in Ukraine and in the world?
For how long? I hope like not for very long, but yeah, it depends. Like, unfortunately, but I will say that it all depends on politics. Like, we should try our best, but I hope like it will not end it like it was in Soviet Union, but yeah, I don't really know, but I hope it will end very soon.
Thank you. Yana, how can the profession of photography, journalism be useful in the current circumstances in Ukraine?
I can say that I don't practice specifically photojournalism in photojournalism area, but I can say what I see from my experience, that Ukrainian photographers share the photos through the world, and people in different areas, even the furthest, can see what happens in Ukraine, can see really the truth, because Russia also can share the false photos, and even they blaming us that we also false in these photos that we're sharing. So I think it also will be will help bring the Russians to justice in future. The photos also of Ukrainian photographers.
David, as of now, have you noticed how the war has affected you in terms of new habits or routines that you're currently doing?
No, well, I guess I'm way more flexible with my plans in case I learned it from the power outages in the winter, and I usually try to avoid sources of loud sounds. Like if something falls, there's a construction being done across the street. And for example, if someone drops a tool, I kind of react, I kind of get scared just from the experience of being under a shelling. So I guess that would be my answer.
Thank you. Sophia, what is it like to study during the war? What difficulties do you face?
Yeah, I think I've answered that in my presentation, during my presentation about that. But yeah, it was really challenging to catch up with missed lessons because like during the raid, during the raids, like it's difficult to focus even not even on study, but yeah, you have to survive. Like what are we talking about? Like it's not about studying, it's about like just living your life. And yeah, I think it's the most horrible part of studying during the war. And yeah, I hope it will end like much more sooner than we all think. Yeah, thank you.
Yana, you shared during your presentation ways people can help the situation and bring a victory to Ukraine closer. What are you personally doing outside of what you've already shared?
Um, I can say that the main area is donating to the army, and I also want to say that there are no small donations. Every dollar is an important support. So I also urge everyone present to continue donating to the armed forces of Ukraine. I can say that every time I see destroyed buildings or wounded Ukrainians, my anger grows, and I immediately look for ways to send money to help them and our military. So I think it's a very good decision to convert our anger towards the Russians into donations for the Ukrainian army, because thanks to them we can live another day.
Thank you. Davyd, how do you see the future of Ukraine?
I guess in the following 10 years after the result, hopefully, which are favorable result for us, the times are going to be hard. There will be economic downfall, but perhaps there is space for hope, since all countries that have rebuilt after the war on such a large scale have shown to be developing at an extreme rate. For example, look at Japan after the nuclear bombs were dropped on it, how the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were quickly built back again, and Germany. So I guess times of hardship and hope await us.
Thank you. Sophia, does your higher education institution respond to alarms? If so, how? And do you think that Ukrainian students will be able to study in such conditions?
Yeah, we already studied like face to face. So, but like in Lviv region, it's like far. It's not far away, but yeah, it's much further from the front line, and it's not safe until like there's rockets over the sky in the sky, and yeah, sometimes it is not safe, but most of the time we can like study face to face and attend our classrooms. So yeah.
Thank you. Yana, many people need help understanding what's going on during the blackouts. Is there anything else you can share, or how these blackouts have impacted your routine and life?
Yes, I've already mentioned this in my presentations. There was schedules when the power was cut off, so you can somehow to schedule your life, but it was very difficult because these schedules wasn't very stable. It always changing, so you can predict also when the lightning was cut off. It was always depends of if Russian will do another missile attack, and if there will be very big damage.
Sofia, you mentioned the spread of Russia's propaganda across the country and the world. How can people discern the truth from misinformation in such situations?
So in situations where misinformation and propaganda are prevalent, it is crucial to be critical thinkers, first of all, and rely on multiple reputable sources for information. And also you should verify information from a couple or multiple sources before accepting it's a true. Also you should cross-check information with official statements and reliable news outlets. Check the credibility of the sources, and it is important to look for objective and unbiased reporting. And yeah, you just can be cautious of sensations or emotionally charged context, and yeah, you'll be much more safer. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yana, how do you see the future of Ukraine?
I can just say that I see Ukraine free and independent, and I don't have any big plans now. I just want the war to end soon, and I'm trying to bring it closer as soon as possible.
Thank you. David, how do you manage to continue your studies despite the war, and what helps you stay concentrated?
Be quite honest, most likely nothing helps me stay concentrated. It's just about seizing the opportunity when it presents itself. If you see an opening in your schedule, you gotta exploit it. I, for example, started because of the air alarms are for some reason my sleep schedule got so messed up. I started waking up at 2 a.m. So I use the free time I have to do homework, to prepare presentations and such. So there's not many things that could help you concentrate that I find. It's just about seizing the moment you are finding yourself in. So be opportunistic, I guess, if I were to put it in one sentence.
Thank you. Last question for all of you. So we'll go in order. Yana, what are some of the specific aspirations and dreams you have for your future once the war is over?
I don't have any big plans now. I just live in that moment.
Thank you. David, do you mind sharing?
Yes. After it all ends, I'll probably try to get in English teaching, and if I don't, I'll probably get into military. So I have two options as of now.
Thank you for sharing. And lastly, Sofia.
Yeah, once war is over, a dream of peaceful Ukraine where young people like me can freely pursue their education and follow their passions without the shadow of the war. And I hope Ukraine, like it is recognized and respected internationally with opportunities for intercultural exchange and global cooperation. I think we're already like on our way, and my goal is to be a part of positive transformation of my country and make a difference through my work as journalist.
Thank you. Very inspiring. Back to you, Dr. Durbak.
Thank you very much, Susie, for moderating. I am very, very pleased with what Sofia, David, and Yana have prepared and presented. I think your information is very, very important, and I would strongly suggest that you try to send some of it in short bits, if possible, daily, to any world media, because there's an awful lot of lack of information that people receive. And despite the fact that you think that nobody's really interested in what is going on in Ukraine, I just had attended a very, very large reception at the UN yesterday, and many of the people were talking about it, but they do not know the information, because most of it, because Russians' propaganda and distortions are much, much greater than what Ukraine is sending. So it's up to you, young people, to be able to talk with other young people, because as one of the young actors I was talking with yesterday said, we have to make our future what we want. We have to be able to have the courage to do what we need to do to have the future where we can live. And that's absolutely true. And it's up to you. So thank you for being here and sharing. And I'm sure that I'll be hearing from you in the near future. Take good care of yourself and have a very good week. Bye-bye.